Welcome once again to the DRH show. Today I'm joined by a licensed psychotherapist, Albert Nguyen. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, it's
How's it
great to
going,
have
Dan?
you here, Albert. And
Yeah,
yeah, I'm glad to be joining you today for this conversation. So just tell us about your background. How did you start? Tell us about your trajectory in life.
yeah, that's a good question because, you know, I wish I could say that I was following my passion to get to this place and I was just following my dreams, but that's not the truth because I think the real answer is this path found me. And not to get all spiritual, but my personal struggles sort of opened up a door for me to show me this path. For the longest time, I didn't know what I wanted for myself to do in my own life and who I was, the meaning of life, and what the purpose was. So I felt lost. And like most people, I was listening to others' advice and a system that's based on like a job, right? And getting a good education. And well, I realized that I just didn't fit the mold. I was like the round peg in that square hole. And one thing that was constant in my life, though, was hardships and adversity. And this is universal. We all have problems, and we go through tough times. These experiences kept pushing me to the edges of my limitations, and it gave me clarity. It brought me closer to myself. And I believe that the quality of your life is really directly connected to the level of responsibility you choose to take on. And we need to ask ourselves quality questions, and that's sort of what got me here. Like, why are we here, and what's a life worth living? These are questions I started asking myself, and it sort of directed my focus. And you don't even have to have an answer, but the quality of these questions can put you on a journey that you need to be on to become your best and your most ideal self. And that's sort of how I found this path. I was just sitting in a class, and a professor was just talking about something about life, and it just really connected with me. And that's really how I got started on this path.
But thanks for sharing your journey, Albert. I think it's quite common for a lot of people who choose to be in the mental health profession that initially they just want to, make sense of life meaning and purpose. And then eventually they just sort of want to have a career helping other people. So I suppose this is a time for us to address some stereotypes about mental health professionals. And you've probably
Sure.
come across a number of these stereotypes. Some
Mm,
people say that to be a mental health professional, you have to have a polished life, a perfect life. So,
yeah.
can you address some of those misconceptions?
Yeah, that's a great a great question. That is absolutely false. And I believe everyone is a work in progress. And even as therapists, that's really what it is about, right? I think one of the number one things that I constantly see in the mental health field is the most important thing is to lead by example. So we understand that stress and hardships and adversity and challenges is a fact of life, and no one is above that. I don't care where you came from. I don't care what kind of status you have in life. Those things will exist no matter where you are in your life. Every level that you get to, there will always be challenges and adversity. And even for a mental health therapist, your life is not polished. It's always a work in progress. And I always tell people that you don't need to have everything figured out as long as you are on the path of trying to improve yourself. That means more than anything else. And I think that's the most important thing. So yeah, even for myself and a lot of my colleagues, our lives are not perfect. And I think that just makes us human.
Absolutely. And I think not a lot of people know that, mental health professionals such as psychotherapists and life coaches, you also see these people, you also have your own life coaches and
Yes.
psychotherapists. But I just want to bring up something. You have an interesting background, Albert, I understand that you're a martial artist and you're also a fitness enthusiast. So how does that link with your role as a mental health professional? How does it, jive in with your professional work with others?
Yes, a lot of people use physical activities as a positive outlet to channel inner tension and conflict. And there are good reasons why leveraging physical movement activities like martial arts and even exercise, sports, dance, yoga can be extremely helpful. Other than the obvious physical benefits of releasing endorphins, helping regulate mood by altering chemicals in the brain and the body, things like sports can teach teamwork, resilience, self-control, mindfulness, and body awareness. And we have to understand that stress exists on a biological level and it affects the body in a certain way. Our body changes as a result of chronic stress and it holds on to it. The body keeps a score. Back pain, migraine, headaches, body aches, high blood pressure, and stress induced like diabetes even, and fatigue. And the physical impact is very significant. So I am a huge advocate of using physical exercise as of any kind as not only a vital part of mental health and an overall wellness program, but as a means to get in tune with our bodies and learn how this machine works. For me, martial arts saved my life. I know that sounds grand, but it really did. If it wasn't for martial arts, my life could have went another direction. It gave me principles and values that I had to embody, and it taught me how to embrace who I was, all of me, my strengths, and especially my limitations, so that I can develop myself from a place of truth. One important lesson that martial arts really taught me was how to be aware of how dangerous I can become. And as I advanced through my trainings and competitions, this awareness deepened. And so by knowing this, you must practice self control. But there is this process of humility as you master your body and mind, and it gives you this deep sense of peace. And like the famous Dr. Jordan Peterson said, better than anyone else that I know, he said something like, if you're incapable of violence, not being violent is not a virtue. People should be dangerous because it takes strength to be a good person. And I 100% agree with this because the core of being human, we all have the capacity to be aggressive, to create chaos, lie, and cheat. It's important to harness aggression so that it can be controlled. And martial arts is all about leveraging this powerful and primitive force. Controlled aggression can be a beautiful thing.
And I think, Albert, that's the thing about psychotherapy. You just have to look for an outlet to channel your energy and to kind of make sense of your life purpose, be it physical activities or writing or even creative arts. But ultimately, what we're trying to aim for psychotherapy is to have change. So, can you just give us like a snapshot of how does change happen in therapy?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of ways that therapy can help with change. And it's mainly a space for intentional self exploration. In that space, we process life experiences, extract insight and wisdom, develop clarity and practice skills, set new intentions, and align ourselves with them through action. But the most important things often happen outside of therapy too. And I know a lot of people come to therapy initially thinking there's like some magic pill or secret step to feeling better. Many people come to therapy hoping to find solutions to all of their problems and alleviate their stress. But what most don't see yet is that their problems has a lot to do with what they're currently doing more than what they're not doing. But at the core of all the problems is really the habit, right? And the solution is the habit. Habit is your behavior, not just what you're doing out here, but also in here, how you think, how you make decisions, how you give into temptations, and how you do everything. Mindset is absolutely important. How you're thinking is what you got the life that you have today. So if you don't like it, it needs to change and you need to unpack that. Most of us have a lot of bad habits. many of which are just outdated. And it's important that if you want to work on building good habits, it's going to be more intentional and very deliberate. So, which is why it feels like it's going to be like a lot of work at first. And however long it takes, it can always come down to the same question, right? It's what will you do?
And I think it's really important that you have like a partner, a psychotherapist that helps you to remind about your goals. So ultimately, this change that we're looking for will take place in the therapeutic process. But I just want to go back to what you were alluding to earlier. You mentioned something
Yeah,
about violence and that great
yeah,
insight from Dr. Jordan Peterson. I suppose you're alluding to the fact that there's a dark side in human condition and in human psychology, and ultimately we have to address that. So can you tell us more about that, the dark side of human condition?
yeah. I like that you tied that into that. That's great. So yeah, this is a great transition from the last question that you had asked me. And we cannot talk about self-development without working with our dark side, because what happens is every time you try to get to a new level in life, a part of you will show up and it sort of gets in the way sometimes. And this part is called the shadow. Everyone has a shadow, a concept that was coined by the famous psychologist Carl Jung. And it's the part of you that has traits you're not so proud of or feel ashamed about. And most of us neglect this part of us. We repressed it. We don't even acknowledge it sometimes. When we don't find ways to integrate the shadow with the shadow tends to show up in our triggers and our emotional reactions that we haven't fully dealt with yet. So most of our problems come from not being aware of this part of us. It could be because we were taught to create a facade or whatnot, but for whatever reason, we ignore it. And ignoring it can lead to poor self esteem, self sabotaging, inflated ego, anxiety, and depression. And the goal is to do the shadow work and begin accepting the shadow so that you can show up as your most authentic self. And look, we are all capable of evil. We all have the capacity to harm others emotionally, physically, and more. And I think that's hard to accept, even in the most well-intentioned person. We have powerful unconscious impulses and tendencies, and if left unchecked, can wreak havoc, on ourselves and others. And it could start very subtle and in an innocent way. A simple lie, cheating on an exam, stealing, rage, and so on and so on. And this just compounds. And I believe that it's within our duties to learn about our dark side and do the shadow work, understanding that if we can tame it and control it, we can learn to leverage these parts of us and use it to accomplish goals and move towards a more integrated person and take all these aspects of us and use every part of it to achieve the life that we want for ourselves.
Now, that shadow that you're talking about, Albert, is that the same as alter ego? And would you mind sharing to us your alter ego and how does it help you to build courage and confidence?
Yeah, I love the concept of the alter ego because there's power in faith and belief. And I'm not talking about religion, but I'm talking about the psychological phenomenon of experiencing strong faith and belief in something. Most of us struggle with self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, and feeling not good enough. We struggle to believe in ourselves, and we have the shadow that casts this fake glass ceiling on what we're capable of doing. And the placebo effect is real. It's basically having strong faith or belief in something bigger than your current self. And yes, you can use religion or spirituality. Some people are not open or ready to lean into that yet, though. So I often encourage creating an alter ego. When I help people, especially kids, to create an alter ego, they sort of laugh a bit about it, but you see the mental shift. They begin to access another part of their own psyche that's always been there. The alter ego is you. You just didn't see it yet. So what happens is you basically everyone has a superhero inside of them. And I like to use the example of Superman a lot because Superman is the alter ego, and then Clark Kent is just his normal self. So when danger comes, he turns into Superman to do what he needs to do to step into danger and to help people. And I think we all have that aspect of ourselves. And if we can shift our mindset to creating an alter ego for ourselves, then when the moment calls for it, when you're facing a struggle or you're facing a challenge that you have self doubt, then you can kind of shift your mindset to step into your alter ego where you have belief in this ideal self of you. And over time, if you keep doing that, that alter egos have a tendency to basically just become you. And that's what we want to do. And that's the power of having an alter ego. And I've been doing this alter ego thing since 2009. So it's been years now. And I really stick by this and I use it for myself in my own personal life. And it has helped me in so many different ways. And I think it's just so important for us to find something to believe in.
Mhm. But just to play the devil's advocate here, Albert, because the way it sounds to me is that you're kind of, teaching people how to be in a fantasy. Wouldn't that have a sort of disadvantage, especially, if you're trying to integrate your life as like what you put earlier?
Yeah, it's so creating an alter ego requires a lot of reflective practice. So
Hmm.
usually when I work with people on creating an alter ego, we are reflecting on certain traits that they feel they need to have to move towards the life that they want for themselves. So usually we really have a set of goals that they want and things that they feel like they're struggling with. And so we'll start identifying certain traits and behaviors and lifestyle choices that they believe that they need to move towards to solve their problems and live the life they want. So then we try to mold and create this character based on those things that we identified. So it doesn't come from a place of creating a false identity so much, but it's more like problem solving and identifying certain traits that would be useful that to leverage as they move towards it instead of uh, toxic positivity, which is something I talk a lot about in my practice, where we're basically forcing ourselves to think positive about something when there are certain real aspects about the negative parts of your life. So with the alter ego, we don't dismiss those parts. We take into account every aspect of your life, and to create a realistic character that you can actually step into. It's not going to be like a real superhero with superpowers per se, but identifying and adopting real life qualities that can actually benefit you as you step towards the life that you want.
Makes sense. Now, Albert, I understand you work with people who have experienced trauma and those who are struggling with PTSD, and all those people who have experienced a lot of unimaginable things. So, with your experience, how do people heal from trauma? How do they overcome it? Do you also try to, kind of encourage them to have an alter ego? Is it different approach with them?
It's a it's it's a combination of a lot of different things. Trauma work is definitely very challenging and it's very difficult. There's a lot of intense emotions that are still there. And the truth is, you don't really get over trauma. And I say this not to be a pessimist. I know many of my patients come to therapy wanting to get rid of that and the pain and suffering that they experience. But the truth is, getting rid of your trauma and the pain that comes with it, it means also getting rid of any sense of happiness and joy that you can possibly experience. I think there's a lot of importance that we need to learn about the pain and suffering and how that can create depth in our joy and happiness in the future. So you don't move on from it. You try to move forward with it and try to find ways to integrate it into your life and get to a place where the experience of the trauma doesn't debilitate you with the intense emotions that it once had. So the true path towards healing and trauma is really finding meaning in it. And I think it's that meaning making that really creates the healing. Your story it matters and how you tell it matters. And it's how you tell your story and the narrative that you have about it is how you move forward with it. But you learn to move forward with it, and you find ways to integrate the painful experiences to enhance who you are and what you do. So we don't try to get rid of it.
You've met a number of people from all sorts of background, but is there something that really surprised you about people?
Yes, you know, people are crazy adaptive. No matter how many traumatic events or things that they have gone through, never it never ceases to amaze me how adaptable people can become and how resilient they are. I've met people who've gone through trauma that I can not even imagine, and seeing how that they can move past that to even live a some normalcy of a life, it's always so inspiring and so encouraging for me as a therapist and as a person. I learned so much from all of my patients, and they inspire me every single day because some of the things that they go through is something that I myself have never been through, in my life. So that's something that never ceases to amaze me, the resilience and the adaptability in people.
Now, Albert, I have a sort of similar role with you, but mine is behind the screen. I don't meet people face to face. I just publish a
Yeah,
range of articles about psychology, about mental health. But sometimes it becomes too much for me because I also publish mental health stories. But with you, it's face to face, so you
yeah.
hear about people's pain and suffering. So how do you deal with compassion fatigue?
Wow, yeah. That's, in the beginning of my career, I didn't deal with it so well. A lot of things really affected me to the point where I would experience a lot of compassion fatigue and a lot of burnout. And I learned that over time to really design a basically like a treatment plan for myself to really take care of myself and put myself first and always continuing to improve myself. But at the same time, it's okay to care for my patients. And I think that's something that I learned over time to not fight those feelings and allow myself to hold space for those things, to care, to be human, and to experience the emotions that I need to experience for my patients. But at the same time, also understanding that I have to keep those in check. And obviously, I see my own therapist to work through some of those things. And it's in that therapeutic space and a lot of spaces that I create to deal with those emotions is what helps me get through. And I find that the emotions that I feel and experience, the compassion that I have for my clients is really what feeds that fire, that passion that I have. And I find ways to leverage that. And this is how it shows and comes up in my work is because I experience so much connection and so much interactions with these types of people throughout my life.
And are there any universal lessons about mental health and self development that you want to convey to people?
Yeah, there are a lot of important things that I believe we all should get good at. First and foremost, it's learning to regulate our emotions and navigating them. And then, of course, deliberately doing something challenging and uncomfortable every day to build um, tolerance, stress tolerance, and to understand that the only true shortcut in life is doing the hard things first. If you're not ready for that, then don't ask for a shortcut and just play the long game. Now, also embrace boredom. Access your creative self. This is how you access your creative self and the deepest part of you. And of course, pain and discomfort is a gateway to your greatest potential. And another thing is build emotional courage. Emotions can't physically hurt us, so it's okay to feel your feelings. This is how you let them go. You need to feel them. In fact, doing something uncomfortable every day teaches this that you're safe to experience the discomfort. You're better for it. And so the other lesson that I want to really emphasize on is to practice telling the truth because when you learn to speak the truth and have integrity and say what you mean and mean what you say, and follow through with what you say. This is the process of building self-respect and self-confidence and self-esteem. And then the acceptance part of the universal truth of life is very important. And so that we stop fighting those things, like stress is a part of life, death is a part of life. Those are certain things that we need to start accepting early on in life, so that when those things show up in our lives, we have some sort of concept and some sort of way to cope with it. And then meditate and practice mindfulness. I a lot of therapists talk about this, meditate, and there's so much research on this now that we can't ignore it. People think that meditation is actually, people think that meditation is about calmness, but really it's a practice that forges and enhances focus. And focus and attention is what gives your life power, right? So if you can focus your attention onto what matters most, you have power. Many of us give up this power throughout the day, whether it's seeking comfort through our smartphones, watching TV, food. We have many pacifying behaviors, right, to comfort ourselves. And meditation and mindfulness allows you to be grounded and less driven by emotional reactions and impulses. So that's the final lesson that I think everyone should be doing.
Now,
Okay.
those are very sensible advice, Albert. But I was just interested to hear what about you? What have you learned when it comes to, as a psychotherapist? What have you learned
Mhm.
in relation to life's purpose and meaning?
Yeah, I say this a lot, but for someone who has worked intimately and directly with more than thousands of people, families, and communities, I have seen a lot of faces of pain and suffering. And I've been in the trenches of the school system, homeless encampments and shelters, hospitals and foster systems, and even the criminal justice system. And I see more and more people who talk too much about the great causes and social issues, but end up doing very little to impact the cause they speak of. Not only that, many of us are so far removed from the actual problems of the world that we don't even know what we don't even know what we're talking about sometimes. You see it on social media, you see it on news outlets all the time. I become very passionate about this work, especially during the peak of the pandemic. My colleagues and I were in the front lines working to help people with mental health issues and more. Issues like anxiety, depression, and suicide started spiking. And what the mainstream society didn't understand is that these problems were already there before COVID-19 in the pandemic took place. So, for example, I was working in the Children's Hospital at this time in the intensive care units, the ICUs. Kids were dying, traumatic accidents were happening, lives were taken, and COVID protocols made it very hard for everybody. And and I remember I had to support a family whose child got hit by a car with a very little chance of survival. But because of the pandemic, they were not, they were not allowed to have more than two visitors at a time in the hospital. So that was extremely hard to tell a family to pick and choose who could go in to see their loved one, who most likely could die. And I was extremely frustrated about this at that time when I saw, what was happening. And too many of us. So the reason why I tell this story too is too many of us stand by in the face of these social issues, and we think we need to do big things to make a real impact. But the challenge is, because what most of these people need is another human being connecting with them. And that's what I've been realizing through my work, is that connection is so important. To save a life, to help a life, just requires a direct connection. So what I want to encourage people to, with meaning and purpose, is just to go out there, roll up your sleeves, get involved and help. We live in a society of just overconsumption of like contributing to the greater good. Look, the truth is, I don't think we have a lack of awareness anymore. I think it's information overload. I think we need more action. I think we need each person stepping up and actually making a difference in someone's life, one family, one community at a time. Just like growing up in a family, it's important to contribute by taking on responsibilities. I believe it's a big reason why so many people feel unfulfilled and experience feelings of worthlessness. if people strive to give as much as they consume, they would be less of, they would be dealing with less with these internal battles. And like I said earlier in our conversation, I believe that finding our purpose and meaning in life is actually directly connected to the responsibilities that we take on. The more responsibilities you take on, the more meaning your life has. It pushes us to rise up. We have to be more than we are, because if we aren't, we're not going to survive. It's in responsibility that most people find the meaning that sustains them through life. And it's not happiness, right? In it's not in happiness, it's not in impulsive pleasures.
Well, thanks for sharing to us how your practice as a psychotherapist, shapes what you think about life's purpose and meaning. Now, Albert, we've learned a lot about psychotherapy and your approach in psychotherapy, but we're already approaching towards the end of this conversation. So I'd like to wrap this up on a lighter note. So I prepared some quick fire questions for you. So I have three quick fire questions for you. So the first one is, what were you afraid of as a child?
What was I afraid of as a child? Hmm. I was afraid of a lot of things as a child. I think I struggled a lot with social anxiety when I
Mhm.
was growing up, and that was definitely a really big thing, and I had to really work on that. And I ended up becoming the thing that I'm most scared of, right? Is interacting with people.
Okay. And what is your favorite word in another language?
I don't know, language. Wow, that's a unique question. Gamma. It's just
What does
being
that mean
just thank you, being grateful.
in Vietnamese?
Yes.
Okay. And if you weren't a psychotherapist or a martial artist, what would you have pursued in life?
Oh, that's an easy one. Singing.
Singing. Okay. And Albert, finally, the floor is all yours. What should people take away from today's conversation? And if you're present in social media platforms, how can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I just want to emphasize that stress does not discriminate, and that I don't care who you are, where you came from, your age, your skin color, your gender identity, your social status, your income, and where you live. We all have problems. Life is hard, and so it's not about finding or hoping for an easier life. That's almost impossible. The best approach is to get stronger, better, and more adaptable. And this is what therapy is all about. I don't want therapy to just be, I'm trying to change and rebrand mental health to being more preventive and instead of being reactive. So I encourage people to seek support, find ways to improve yourself, and you can find my work on my website, which is www.optimindcounseling.com. And then I also have an Instagram, Optimind Counseling. And you can also look me up on LinkedIn.
Okay, so all of those links will be on the description note. Thanks for sharing your thoughts today, Albert. Albert Nguyen, a licensed psychotherapist. It's great to have you here on the DRH show.
Thank you so much, Dennis.